So far with Obi-Wan Kenobi, there are some worrying issues, and not the typical dumb glaring moments like with Leia's chase scene, but fundamental issues with tone, direction, cinematography, editing, and of course, writing. The thing I was worried about the most that has essentially come true, which is the show is not committing to a darker tone. The Inquisitors hunting down the Jedi in post-Order 66 is one of the darkest parts of the Star Wars timeline, and the show makes it feel tensionless and like it's not a big deal overall. To me, this is mainly because the writers make the Inquisitors feel like middling villains. Literally, their opening scene where they discover a Jedi who ends up escaping makes them seem like buffoons who are bad at their jobs. Not to mention, two of them didn't even look like they were trying to capture him, and then he just throws down a raptor and they give up chasing him? I know the Grand Inquisitor had to stop the third sister, but this act alone showcases so much incompetence between them that they seem utterly ineffective. Then when Reva was terrorizing some people and restoring a bit of menace that was missing, the other Inquisitor abruptly stops her. So right away, the villains don't come across as intimidating as they should be. And that's even exemplified through the fact that there's a character posing as a Jedi for money and clearly isn't scared of the consequences of being caught. And then he is caught and nothing really happens to him. I know Reva didn't kill him because he technically wasn't a Jedi, but the whole idea of spreading hope in Jedi still being present in the world should at least be punishable. Then looking at the tone for the rest of the show, primarily regarding Obi-Wan, the writers don't really focus that much time on him and they keep cutting around to different happier areas like with Leia, instead of fully immersing us in Obi-Wan's tragic story. Like, I assume a lot of people were expecting a Logan-esque battered down character study to start, but what we get is a shallow version of that, where we have brief moments that drudge up the past. Most of his time is just chilling at work, and there's not a lot that invokes or allows us to open up to Obi-Wan to see how he truly feels. Instead of more of a character study, this first episode felt way more plot-oriented, which I think is a bad overall direction choice to make. Like, you have Ewan McGregor, who's a great actor, so give him the material and let him go to work, and let the audience be immersed again in his character. Because what we have so far with Obi-Wan is pretty interesting and most of his scenes are actually good. It's just the show overall is one step away from being great. Then there's another glaring issue that's been bugging me since the Book of Boba Fett, which is how these shows are being shot. Firstly, it doesn't feel like they're really trying to make the footage look that cinematic. I think a good example is the introduction of the Inquisitors, where they walk out of the ship and everything is brightly lit, there's no contrast, no interesting compositional shots, and instead they mostly rely on wide shots. This feels like a lazy introduction, and the cinematography is not aiding the villains by making them look menacing by any means. If you contrast this to the introduction of Cad Bane, where it's an extreme wide shot of an unknown figure walking towards our protagonist, while obscured by the radiating heat, is so much more mysterious and badass. Not to mention the cool close-ups showing off the great design of the character. But instead, what we get in Obi-Wan Kenobi feels way more generic, and this isn't just for one scene. The cinematography throughout the show so far never really blows you away or wows you, for what should otherwise have a high production value. This kind of scares me for when they get to the bigger action scenes, because if it looks anything like the action we've seen so far, then I'm definitely scared. But hopefully they are saving the budget for the later episodes, which I assume are going to be more expensive. And one thing that especially does not help the cinematography is the jarring editing. Looking at the rooftop chase scene alone, I'm really surprised the director looked at this scene and thought it was okay. Between rapidly cut action that makes everything feel incoherent and choppy, cutting between so many different subjects reaching up to 6 different people, and the stupid forced parkour that is shown via wide shots that makes her look like she's jumping around on wires looks terrible. All of this combined with the lackluster cinematography and weird plot beats like Leia jumping off a goddamn rooftop makes this all feel cheap. Not to mention I'm picking scenes that are alright and not the atrocious chase scene with Leia, or should I say scenes. Which, let's get into Leia, because it feels kind of forced to throw a witty, quippy young Leia who looks like she's 7.
How old are you?
10.
You don't sound like you're 10.
Acting like she's 15 years old into a story that should be focused on Obi-Wan. The second she showed up, I immediately said, oh god, don't just evolve the story into another father-like figure escorting a kid road trip adventure, which has been done to death, along with them already doing that with the Mandalorian. So hopefully she doesn't become the primary focus for the rest of the story, and if she is, then I don't know what the writers were smoking, because they could have taken the story in infinitely more interesting directions than babysitting a quote-unquote child who's written by an adult who doesn't know how children act. This is confirming what I feared a few months ago, where an article came out saying that Disney rewrote the Obi-Wan series because it was too dark. And knowing this, all I can think is that they interjected a young Leia to brighten up this story, which, surprise surprise, is what everyone dislikes the most about the show so far. So I feel like the future quality of the show hinges on a combination of Disney maybe trusting the original writers enough, and them brightening up the tone too much, because it's Disney, and that one-hand decapitation will probably be the most violent thing you see. I know this all sounds very grim and I'm coming across as hating the show, but I feel very passionate about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I want to critique what is wrong, because this story alone has so much potential and I'm desperately hoping that Disney doesn't ruin it, or even does a mediocre job with it. So far it's not worse than the Book of Boba Fett, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it gets a bit better.